There we go. Awesome. So thank you so much for being here today with us, Candace. So the format for today is just a Q&A session. So if anyone wants to ask a question, feel free to put up your hand. And to introduce everyone, I'm Rachel Baker, founder of Tejo.ca. We offer tech solutions to cosmetic companies, primarily doing augmented reality virtual makeup try-on and skin diagnostics. And Candace Smith is the founder of French Press PR. And she's going to talk to us today about how to get free publicity for your startup. So more earned media as opposed to paid media. So as I said, if you have a question, just put up your hand. And without further ado, I guess I'll ask you a few questions to get started.
Sure. Absolutely. And thank you for having me here.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. So my first question is, how do you know if your company or project is ready for public relations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when I got started initially with PR, I wasn't a journalist. I don't have a journalist background. I didn't go to school for this. I really started because I was an entrepreneur. I had a product and I needed to get it out into the world. And so there's many different stories that you can tell to press that don't necessarily involve your product, even if you're starting to get ready to launch your product. You may not yet be ready to have your product or company specifically reviewed by a journalist or by even a blogger, but you may have something else from your backstory or your expertise that you can share with the media. So while you may not be 100% on, 100% ready to start going out for, say, gift guides or a full product review or anything like that, no matter what stage you're at, you can still find folks to start building relationships with or start sharing your message or your expertise about either what's different about your product, what's different about the industry, what are problems that need to change within the industry. Think about the stories that you can leverage to bring value to the audience who needs to hear it most. So long answer to a short question, I'd say you're always ready for PR in some way, shape, or form, even if that doesn't mean you're actively pitching. Sometimes that just means doing research on who's out there and what they're talking about that may be relevant to your industry and making a list for later, or following those journalists on Twitter or LinkedIn, and starting to engage with them like they're real people, because they are. And doing that and building out those personal relationships. I always say that PR means personal relationships, not just public relations. That helps you in the long term, because you start to get to know folks, what they write about, what they like to cover, what they don't like to cover. And if there's opportunities for you to provide some thought leadership, all the better.
So how do you, let's just say you're just starting out, how do you start developing those relationships and find out who those thought leaders are in industry? So there's a bunch of kind of questions in there, but we might have to dissect it further. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. All right, getting started from scratch, right? Yeah. I always say, do a media landscape research. And what does that mean? That means that you're looking to see what else is out there in the press that's being published about your industry, right? So if you're in the cosmetics industry, if you have a product of some sort, or maybe you're thinking about changing the way that a product is being made, or you're providing a service to folks that's solving a problem that exists, right? Think about those things first, and what industry do you fall into? What keywords are going to help you find stories about folks in that industry? Start researching. Open up Google News, or go to some of your preferred news sources. So let's say you're looking at like a lifestyle publication, like Elle or Glamour or what have you, because you know they do a lot of cosmetics roundups, let's say, or beauty focused publications, Pop Sugar and the like. Or maybe you're looking at more holistic and natural, you know, naturalistic. Maybe you're looking at like a Goop, or you're looking at like Well and Good or Mind Body Green, right? So go to those specific places where you know that news stories are being written about your industry or your topic, places where you'd like to get featured. Make a list. Figure out who's writing, what are they writing about, what are the different story angles that seem interesting. And over time, what you'll see, and when I say over time, you could literally do this in the course of a half hour, right? So like over time, as you're doing this, you'll start to notice patterns or trends, the same types of words coming up, the same types of questions coming up about your industry. Make a note of what those things are, figure out what your talking points might be or ways that you can differentiate yourself, and then take a note of who's writing those articles, right? So those folks who are writing those articles are the people that you want to reach out to. So you can usually find them on LinkedIn, you can find them on Twitter, you can find their email addresses if you're searching, search their name and email address. You can very often find people there just using that simple search on Google. That's how I got started doing it. I didn't have to purchase any lists in order to find email addresses. And then you reach out. You reach out, whether you're following, you're connecting on LinkedIn, you're following them on Twitter, you're retweeting what they're writing. You don't have to pitch immediately. Sometimes you can just do a soft open, just like, hey, I really love what you said about this particular topic. I think your roundup of products was great, but have you tried one that doesn't use almond oil or something like that, right? So, you know, I love your roundups for good housekeeping, but have you considered one that's AAPI owned or something like that? You know, if so, I've got the perfect product for you, right? So you can either like start with a soft in and tell them what you appreciate about what they're writing, or, you know, just put yourself out there.
Cool. So, what's the difference between public relations and marketing?
So there's a lot of overlap, but the way that I like to differentiate is marketing is a very large umbrella, right? Marketing is your way of getting yourself out there. It's what you say about yourself. And public relations, which is can fall under that umbrella. It can be paid. There are paid opportunities, but the differentiator is public relations is what you, marketing is what you say about yourself to the world, and public relations is what others say about you. So think about those two separately. Public relations is how you're getting other people to tell your story for you to their audiences, and marketing is you telling your story.
So, what kind of budget do you need to be successful at building a public relations campaign?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen successful strategies. I ran my own strategy for $0, 0 cents. You can, you know, spend very little, but spend quite a lot in terms of time. So you do have to think of like the opportunity cost. Everything's going to have some type of cost. It's either going to be a time cost or it's going to be a monetary cost. So when you're thinking about time cost and you're bootstrapping, you may, in order to be successful, want to spend like 3 to 5 hours a week on your PR strategy, right? Or if you're looking at a monetary cost and you want to hire somebody, or whether it's in-house, you're hiring one publicist or you're hiring an agency, I mean, prices can start anywhere from, you know, say 500 a month to, if we're talking big agencies, that's like 15, 20,000 a month, right? So that will really run the gamut according to the type of help that you want. But if you are really budget strapped, budget conscious, and you are time time rich, which startup founders are these days. But if you have more time than cash, then think about, spending 3 to 5 hours a week on your PR strategy, outreach, nurturing those relationships, and pitching yourself.
Awesome. So what does public relations success look like?
That's going to be different for every founder. But because most of the founders in this community specifically are within the beauty industry or beauty realm, I would say you're more likely than not to have a product. If you have a product, then you're going to want to take a look at sales. However, sales are not the only indicator of PR success, right? Like it would be with marketing. Marketing, you look at the number of sales that you've made, and it's a pretty easy to measure that graph. As marketing spend goes up, sales go up, or what have you. But for PR, there's also the added variable of reputation, and engagement, right? So when you're thinking about, the different PR opportunities that you get when you're getting other people to speak about you, PR is just bringing folks to your site. It's not selling them specifically, right? Your site has to sell them. So, Rachel, when you and I were talking earlier, I gave you an example of a client of mine who had created a sustainable shoe that was made by artisans, and we helped them get into a gift guide in Vogue and another gift guide in People for the holidays. And we're very excited. Everybody was celebrating, thrilled, and she came back to me just a couple days later, and she said she was really disappointed. What was she disappointed by? Well, she didn't make the number of sales that she anticipated initially. And so we sat down and I said, well, let's think about this, because the lifetime value of this article is going to go beyond the initial sales over that first weekend that it came out, right? Let's take a look at how many people actually signed up for your newsletter. What was the inbound traffic that you got? And we found out that even though she made only about like 5-6 sales, which seemed very small at the time, she actually got 200 inbound traffic and interest, and people that ended up signing up for her newsletter. And so with that, we can see that it actually was very successful for her. And so her next job is to figure out, what is your customer acquisition cost? How do you use retargeting ads? How are you engaging? Are you consistently putting out a newsletter, right? Those are the things that you can do within marketing to make sure that you're nurturing these customers down the sales funnel and getting them to that ultimate sale. So take a look at some of those different metrics beyond just the initial, do we make a quick sale?
Right. Yeah. Also, it oftentimes takes people a while to decide what they're going to buy for people. So they might see an article in, October or November as a gift buying guide, and maybe make a list. Okay, this would be great for so-and-so, and not actually complete their purchase until December.
Yes.
So how, as an entrepreneur, do you begin to develop your story?
Yeah, absolutely. When we're thinking about story development, especially what we do for clients, and what I started to do for myself was figure out, firstly, what are you passionate about talking to people about, right? There's the product side of it, which of course you can talk about your product all day long. You want people to review it. That's great, right? That's one side of the story. But it's not just about going up to a reporter and saying, my product is great, you have to try it, because they're getting 50 to 100 other people that are coming to them or more saying, my product is great, you have to try it. And after a certain point, their bedroom's going to get completely full of all of the different products that they're trying. Everything's going to start to look the same. So you have to differentiate yourself somehow, right? So that's where your background story comes in. Think about the why. Why did you get into this in the first place? Why are you doing what you do? Why do you love the business that you're in? And how do you actually help people solve a particular pain point, right? If you have a makeup shade that is more inclusive and is actually solving a problem for folks that don't have access to that kind of a shade in that foundation, or, you know, a blush stick or what have you, and now you're finally making that an option for folks, that's a great part of the story to lean into, right? If you're in it because you've created some new type of product that uses a sustainably harvested palm oil, and that's solving a problem, or a pain point, that's great. If you're only working with factories that are fair trade and are paying their folks a living wage, right? Those are things that you want to mention and lean into. If your product is actually helping people with terrible rosacea or acne problems, and it's like changing their lives for the better, that's the why that you want to lean into, right? So think about the things that you're actually doing in your day-to-day. What are you passionate about? What is your background and expertise? What are the things that you're doing that differentiate you from others in the space? And that's going to be the story angles that you can pull out and actually share with journalists to get them interested in you.
Okay, so now that you have kind of an idea of what kind of story you want to be putting out, what do you need to include in a press release, and how often should you be like putting out press releases?
Yeah, I'm always stuck on this definition of a press release, because honestly it's starting to become a little outdated in some circles. You can get your story out without needing to create a specific press release, right? A press release, the way that I define it and think of it as, is a document that has the facts laid out about your product, right? It's just all the facts in one sheet that let people know this is who I am, this is what, right? It answers all the W's, right? We learned them in school: who, what, where, when, why, and maybe a how. That is a sheet that journalists can use to pull from when they're writing an article, right? So they don't have to go back and interview you a bunch of times. But you can get around having to issue a press release on a news wire, which can get very expensive very fast. And you can actually just send out information to the journalists that you want to connect with, especially if it's a product, in an email. You say, hey, listen, here's the information that I have. I'd love for you to try my product. This is what's different about us. If you want to hop on the phone, let me know. Or if you want a sample, give me your mailing address. And it's as easy as that. You don't have to put together a huge long press release unless you're doing something that's completely different. It's changing the industry in some way, shape, or form, right? There's like something particularly newsworthy and innovative that you want someone to write about, that either hasn't been done before, or it's being done in a different way. It's addressing a particular niche that nobody's talking about, right? Those kinds of things may need a few more sentences, and more real estate, let's say, on a page. And you can put those things together, but you can also change it up a little bit. You can make what do you call it? I mean, we like to use presentations, like just a Google slide deck. Make it look nice, show pictures and have some quick facts about your product, and send them out. You can, so that's one side, press release. Press release versus not press release. You don't need one. You can have one if you want to, but you don't need to. News wires they don't have the same clout that they used to. So actually, if you look at the trends of Cision Newswire, which is one of the top, there's PR Newswire, Cision Newswire, and any number of different newswire services that you can use. The number of journalists that are actually opening them and reading them and reacting to them is dropping drastically. Journalists much prefer to get the personal outreach these days, especially when you're thinking about freelancers. So freelancers are not particularly hired by one publication. They pitch a story that they have to multiple publications and see which editor will pick up the story and publish it. So they're more likely to want you to reach out personally and, give them a story, show them that you've done your research on who they are, what they like to write about, rather than a blanket email. The other part of the question that you asked was, how often should we send out press releases? So think about the story that you're sharing, right? What kind of news, like how newsworthy is it? Is this a new product launch? Is this a company launch? Is this you're bringing out something new into the world? If you're doing one of those things and you're bringing something new that hasn't been done before, that's worth a press release, right? That's worth reaching out to journalists en masse and saying, here we are, here's our story, come chat with us. We have a lot of value to bring to the world, right? But then on the other hand, if you want to think about an evergreen PR strategy, which is what we do for our clients, because we're a full service agency working with startup founders and mission-based founders, is think about the stories that and the voices that are being heard throughout the year. It's usually the same folks in your industry that are being interviewed over and over again. We've all heard, for example, this is in fashion, but Sarah Blakely, right? Sarah Blakely's interviewed for everything. Everybody knows Spanx. Everybody loves Spanx. Everybody wants to hear what Sarah Blakely has to say. But there are plenty of other fashion designers and innovators and disruptors who deserve to be heard and are doing things maybe not as scalably or as large as she's done them, but their voices deserve to be heard too, right? So think about ways that you can insert yourself into those narratives. And those are the types of conversations that you can have when you're nurturing these relationships with journalists. They're writing about a particular trend in the beauty industry, and you reach out and say, yeah, we really don't use, we've stepped away from palm oil, and here's why. I'm getting stuck on palm oil because I've talked to somebody about it recently. But does that kind of help? There's always an opportunity for evergreen PR and being able to share your opinion as a thought leader within your industry and as an expert in what you do, versus, the moment that you have a new launch of something that you're bringing out into the world.
Right. So how often, just sort of on a tactical level, should I be emailing a journalist? Let's say there's a journalist that I absolutely love. I really want them to post an article about me.
Mm-hmm.
How often should I be sending them emails? Should I be sending them the same emails, or should I be sending them something different?
I usually use the rule of threes. So send 3 emails. If you haven't heard back, they're not interested, or it's just not the right time. Right. Doesn't mean that they're not interested in you. It just may mean that maybe they're really busy right now and they're, they have their content calendar already done through the rest of the year, or maybe they're only writing about things that their editor assigns to them, and your product doesn't necessarily fit in. So if you're reaching out and you've reached out 3 different times, you reach out with the initial email and then you do one follow-up and you say, hey, circling back on this, to bump it up to the top of your inbox. And then you send one more time, hey, just wanted to double check, make sure that this made its way to you. And if you're not interested, I totally understand. And so, do those 1 week apart. So it's 3 weeks, 3 emails. And at that point, if you know for sure that that person is the right person to get your story or product in front of, keep reading what they're writing about. Figure out what are some of the things that they're discussing, and maybe see, do you need to tweak your story a little bit? Do you need to change the things that you're saying, or change the angle of how you're approaching, instead of trying, you have to try this product because it's new and it's out there, and you write about products like this. Maybe the angle instead is, hey, I see that you write a lot about, women-owned brands in the United States, but have you tried this women-owned brand from the UK? We're something new and you might like that. Reaching out with updates about information that may be relevant to them, Like, hey, I know you weren't interested in our cherry lip gloss, but man, we've got a chocolate lip gloss that's coming out and it's really great. And I know that you mentioned you love chocolate things in your last roundup and, you know, XYZ, right? So trying to find commonality. If you're reaching out with one story angle, you do it 3 times over 3 weeks. Stay in touch. If you can think of another angle, then same rule applies. 3 more emails, 3 more weeks. The only thing that will, you know, only time you know it's a no is when they actually say no.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So where do I begin to start to build out a list of journalists that I should reach out to?
Sure. So going back to the media landscape research, you've got your list of articles that you want to read, and just take a look at the journalists who are writing those articles. That's literally how you get started.
Okay. And how do I find their emails and their contact information? Is there a strategy?
You can go to Twitter. You can go to LinkedIn. I think those are 2 of the best places to find journalists. That's where I find most of the journalist information. And then also when you go into either Twitter or you go into Google itself, type in their name, type in the publication that they write for, and then type in email address. And more often than not, you'll actually find their email address. So
Okay.
it's not too difficult. It can be for some of the other some of the publications. You may find that their email address isn't readily available. But if they are if they're a freelancer, they're more likely than not to have a portfolio website, a personal portfolio website, and their contact information is almost always on there. The second thing to think about is if they are an actual journalist that is hired for a particular publication and writes for a particular publication, and you can't find their email address, try to find email addresses of other folks that work for that publication, and more likely you'll be able to see the format of their email addresses. And it's usually, you know, follow that same format. So if it's first name dot last name at hearst.com, then try that. If it's first initial last name at hearst.com, then try that, right? So see what they usually do for their format, and that's more likely going to be the way that they format their email. So those are just some tricks to think about.
Cool, thanks. That's really helpful. So when I'm writing the actual email to pitch reporters, what do I need to include, and how do I write something that's going to be enticing to them?
Keep it short. You know, your first instinct is going to be to write everything under the sun to try to convince them, please love me. Please write about me. I'm great. Here's why. Keep it short. Think about it as if you were writing a tweet. Here's why you should care. Or hi. I read that you, or I read your recent article on blank, or I saw that you write about blank. And I have something else for you to review. Here are 3 reasons why it fits what you write about, or here are 3 reasons why it fits the needs of your audience, or it will provide value to your readers. Would you like to learn more? You can include a link. You can include an embedded photograph. Embedded photos tend to perform really well. And then from there, you know, invite them to either send you their address if you're going to send them a sample, or invite them to a virtual coffee with you. And that's it. Leave it really short, sweet, to the point.
All right. So there are so many things that I want to do, but how do I prioritize my visibility strategy?
Schedule it. Schedule it like you would a meeting, honestly. I mean, when it comes to thinking about how to represent yourself, sometimes, you know, you've got podcasts scheduled, and you have that scheduled for you, and that's great. That fits in your calendar. But the actual researching and pitching, and, you know, which can take time, that needs to become a bit of a habit. And so, especially if you've got a holiday season coming up, which we do, I would be thinking about devoting much more time to that. especially right now, because that's when reporters are starting to gather their sources for their holiday roundups. And on the off season, that's when you spend a little less time a week. Maybe it's 1 hour a week or 2 hours a week, right? It doesn't have to be an all-encompassing thing, especially if you're just getting started. But if you're finding that it has a real ROI for you, it's worth, I would say it's worth its weight in gold to really budget accordingly for the amount of time that you're going to spend trying to nurture relationships. Because if it brings in more inbound leads and it expands your digital footprint, that's the best thing you could ask for. It's better than, I mean, it's better than paying for sales in some cases.
So I have a product announcement, but it's not going to be for another, 6 or 8 months. What should I do to engage media in the meantime?
Start doing what I mentioned before, building out those relationships early, putting out feelers, following, liking, commenting, maybe put a list of your top 10 folks from different publications that you'd like to engage with, and just focus on those, right? There's a lot of writers out there. Don't overwhelm yourself by saying I need to talk to thousands of people. Focus in on the main folks that you might be interested in reaching out to, and engage with their commentary. If they don't have social commentary, that should give you a sign that they're probably not the best people to reach out to. They should have some sort of a presence. They shouldn't be publishing in an echo chamber. You would hope that they have some sort of engagement or following, and engage with them. If a lot of times those reporters are asking questions on Twitter, I'll often see writers actually asking, like, journal request, pitch request. I'm trying to find sources for this article that I'm writing. Pitch me, or let me know if you've heard of blank. And sometimes it's not even related to myself or another client. I'll reach out to them and I'll say, hey, here's a source that you might want to reach out to. And then I at someone else. And what I've done there is I've done them a favor, right? So those are just little ways that you can help with building value and building those relationships early on. Something else I would say, if you're 6 months out, definitely start building out that strategy first. Build out your list of who you want to reach out to. Around 3 months in, that's really when you want to start hitting the pavement to pitch actively. Because the news cycle and the writing cycle, editorial cycle, does take more time than you would think. Of course, we know that breaking news can come out same day, but that's because it's pushed to the very top of the list. If you're a product and you're trying to get into the editorial news cycle, you have to get first you have to gain interest, then you have to get approved. Whether that's approval from the editor or approval from the journalist, you usually have to send product. That takes time to ship. They have to open it. They have to respond, review it, see if they like it, and then they have to write about it. And then the editor has to edit it, and then it goes live, right? Or then it goes into the publishing calendar, and then it goes live, right? So that can take some time. So usually when it comes to beauty and the clients that I've worked with over the past, let's say, since 2020, the usual turnaround time for the beauty industry from first initial outreach to actual publication is around 2 to 3 months. So just think about that if you've got to launch.
No. So what's the best platform for thought leadership? Sorry, I'm sort of changing course a little bit, but.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And of course, if anyone has any questions specifically, feel free to hop in or raise your hand. Happy to answer any specific questions. But I don't necessarily think there's a best thought leadership platform. From a media standpoint, I would say LinkedIn is probably the one that I'm pushing the most for my clients right now, because there's so many opportunities for getting seen and it's not flooded like the Instagram algorithm or things like that. You can actually find like-minded folks that are wanting to talk about usually how to be innovative, how to change the world, how to change the future of work, how to be more sustainable, how to solve problems, right? So LinkedIn is the platform that I usually recommend for thought leadership.
Okay. What are your thoughts about conferences and other speaking opportunities?
They can be great. They can be expensive. If you're going to start applying for speaking opportunities specifically, those can take up to 6 months. So think ahead when you're starting to plan out what your speaking topics might be. If you want to be on a panel, if you want to do a keynote, and remember to have a one-pager ready of your speaking topics. But in terms of the actual ROI of conferences, that's going to depend. Who's attending? Are they actually, are they vendors? Is Sephora going to be there? Are they going to, are they buyers for these shops, or are they, are you going to a smaller holiday conference for makers kind of thing? I've been to a few of those and paid for a table and actually, did better than break even. I kind of doubled my sales and sold out, and then those can be great, so they can be worthwhile. Sometimes it's just about having the budget to test.
So should you prepare for a speaking opportunity?
Depends. Can we break that down? What type of speaking opportunity?
How about with a podcast?
Sure. So podcasts, you want to research the podcaster. What do they like to talk about? Do they have the same types of questions that they like to ask over and over? Some podcasters have like a signature question that they like to ask always, and having an answer ready for that. So do your research, have bullet points of what you'd like to talk about specifically, ready to go. And then also remember, as you're practicing your talking points, even if the podcaster doesn't give you an opportunity to share out, like good podcasters should always give you an opportunity to connect with their audience. But if they don't, always remember to have a call to action. So like by the way, thank you so much for having me. And for anybody who's listening who might be interested in learning about what we do and where we are, my social media handles are at French Press PR, frenchpress.pr on Instagram, and you can find us at www.frenchpresspr.com, right? That's just an example. And thank you for joining us, Patience. Yeah, so I would say always make sure you've got your main speaking points written down, whether or not you cover them. Figure out what the podcaster likes to talk about, if they have any specific questions, and then make sure you have your call to action. And other than that, show up authentically, be yourself. Have fun with it, because it's a conversation. It's sometimes it's an interview, but hopefully you end up having a pretty good conversation.
So how would that differ if you're preparing for a conference versus a podcast?
Sure. As a speaker?
Yeah, as a speaker.
Yeah. There, you're going to want to prepare your speech. So you're either going to have, if you have a panel, then you'll ask for the questions beforehand and prepare what your answers might be for those questions. Panels do be prepared for audience questions, Q&A. But if you're going to be on a panel, if you're going to be presenting at a keynote, practice your speech. Make sure that you've got your main points down. If you have visuals, or you have something that you're bringing, like swag bags or business cards, like make sure that you have everything ready, not just to present your message, but to give people ways to find you afterwards. That's always one of the big overlooked pieces, is that people get so caught up on the message that they're putting out that they forget, like, oh wait, this is also an opportunity for people to find me after. So make sure you've got your business cards with, or stickers with a QR code on them, ways that people can find you. If you have like a specific hashtag, or, a social media handle and you want folks to find you there, like always just remember to have those things ready to go. If you have a big announcement or launch coming up, make sure to mention those things. Yeah, come prepared to let people know how to find you.
Okay. Yeah. I think we'll just wrap things up then.
Sure.
Thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
really appreciate it. Your answers are fantastic and you've done a really great job. So thank you so much. And I'm just going to
Thank
stop
you.
recording.
Yeah, thanks for having me.